I've got this old bench right here. I don't know, it's 30, 40 years old, and I'm redoing it. Put over there on the other side. My dog cemetery's at. And I'm going to use this rough cut cedar that I had cut from trees that I cut down on the other side. And they all natural live edge on all of them at one time. I cut these down. These were 9-footers. I just cut them down more to be able to manage the size and about what size the bench is going to be. These are rough cut boards, about 1.25 inches. Some of them, they got 1.5 inch on one end and 1 1/8 inch on the other. Well, I had them milled down, and this is all from our property, from trees. You can see that this is definitely rough cut. And I'm just planing it down. I bought this planer. I do need to change the blades on it, but I bought this planer for $150, and they're about $400, $450 with tax. So it's been a very good investment. So I'm going to plane this down. You just take a little bit at a time. You don't want to do a whole lot. But you can see what a difference it makes. This has been well worth the money. I had a smaller one before, Ryobi, and it did very good, but you couldn't do anything over a 10-inch board. And then when you lift up on this coming out, that helps keep it from getting that snipe at the end or the front. It makes some difference. I made this jig here. And all it is 2 clamps. You can make them longer, wider, whatever you want. But it's 2 clamps, and you just get them evenly on the board. Make sure this is square on the back and goes into your fence. Then I put this in here, and then after I cut it, I'll have a square edge on this one side to be able to square everything up. I'm cutting this board, and it's got a little warp in it. It pinched so hard I could hardly get it through here past the splitter. And once you do, I mean, you can shove and shove, about turn this over. So then you take a wedge, any kind of wedge you can, stick down here in the end, and it keeps it from pinching down through here. Then it cuts so much easier and better. I'm sure there are better ways of cutting this 4-foot small piece out. But it's only about 2.5, 3 inches wide, and it's curved. And I know if you get too much of this length out here, you'll snap and break it off. So the only thing I knew to do was clamp these boards here down to where they don't come apart, and they add support to everything in the middle, because I definitely don't want to break that 4-foot piece that's on the back. It takes a whole big wide board just to make it. But that helps stop a lot of the vibration and shaking and moving around. So this is a cutout piece over here, because that back of that bench has got a lot of big curves in it. All that scrap, pretty much scrap wood now. Cutting or sanding, you want to always cut and sand outside the lines. That's why I cut everything a little bit bigger, because once you cut into the lines, it's too late. So I used the old pieces of wood, measured them, and added a little extra so it wouldn't be too short. Then after you get all your pieces pretty much cut out, still got to finish cutting the edge of the top. Still have to do a round over on the tops of them. But this, you want to piece it together like a puzzle so you can make sure the ends and everything are going to be flush and it's not too wide or too short on one end or the other. Looks simple, but for me it's a little more of a project than I would have thought. I want to get everything clamped in place. I just flipped it over because I got 14 screws to put in here. So getting them clamped in place, you can see where any gaps are, or if you got to take a little bit off or not. And I'll pre-drill it with a smaller hole and put the screws into it. Well, due to this being off a little bit, I know I couldn't make it perfect. I got a little gap down here, and this gap wasn't that big, but after everything got done it seemed to be bigger. And I can force this down fairly close, but I'm afraid after a while it will crack from being forced down. So that's why I keep a lot of these little thin boards like this here around. I either sand them and cut them. I cut this little notch out right here. I'm going to glue it and slide it into here to fill that gap. Probably an easier way, but I'm not sure how to go about this to get it assembled because the old wood was rotted away. I know the back piece is just a 1/4 inch underneath 4 feet. So these boards need to be just a little under 4 feet, a 1/4 inch. But to try to hold this heavy metal up, finally got it to where I could get it supported, even though now I can get a little more lined up and get a board and holes drilled in it, and I'll be able to move it around some. I don't have a clamp long enough to hold the top together and to hold that in place. So I measured down 1 inch below these holes and put little blocks in there with a line and clamped them for this to set in. And then to get this top squeezed together, I took a ratchet and pulled it together like that. Well, finally got it put together, not having nothing to go by. I made these boards like 2.5 to 2 3/4 inches wide. Then this last one, because this is all curves, I made it 1.5 inches wide. Then I'll have to space out the gaps. I got to take each one off and sand it, and then knock off the sharp edge, and then put some coating on it, and it'll be finished. It's about 35, 40 years old. I went with wider boards on this. The pieces that I had left from the old parts, of course they were rotted off at the ends and stuff, but they were about 1 3/4 inches, 2 inches. And I made these in general 2 3/4 inches because wider gives you a little more support. But when you got these round frames, there's only about 2 places where it's actually flat, so I use a little bit wider, because when you get to certain spots, just like here in the front, that's only 1.5 inches, and it's all due to that curve. You can't make it no wider. If you make them too wide, they won't lay down flat, and they could crack and break. This bench here, I just got done redoing it. Took a lot. It's harder than doing a glider because I had nothing to go by. Had to make all these boards. Some of them are a little bit warped, but I decided to make it out of cedar. Not as strong as the ash that it was made out of, but it's also double the thickness. This metal piece has been laying in our barn probably for 15 years or longer. This whole bench before was probably, I'm guessing, close to 40 years ago. But after losing my dog, I decided to fix it up too also, and I may end up taking it over there to the dog cemetery. This is all made out of cedar. Stainless steel bolts.